Welcome. I'm Deany Laliotis. I'm an EMDR trainer, consultant, and psychotherapist. And I'm in the middle of teaching an EMDR training to mental health professionals who are just learning to apply EMDR therapy to their clinical practices. So one of the questions that came up today is a great question that not only comes up during training, but also comes up in case consultation. The question is, what do you do when a client isn't processing or isn't responding to the processing? My first question is, what's going on that's the case? So in the clip that I showed as part of the training, I showed a client whose response to being overwhelmed and devastated by her mother's rages is to brace against the experience and try to soothe herself and try to move away from it as much as possible, because she has been and continues to be on her own with her emotional responses to her mother's rages. So when we target one of those experiences, we do a set. I check in. What are you noticing now? She says, it's better. But it doesn't look or feel better when I check in non-verbally. So I said, can you say more about what you're experiencing? And then she goes on to describe that she's just holding on to herself so she can manage to get through the experience because she's very uncomfortable. So I went on to explain to her that while that completely makes sense, I totally understand. At the same time, that's her reactivity is what we're reprocessing, because every time that happens, she gets hijacked. And that's what we want to change, because we can't change her mother's actions. We can only change her reactions. So I asked her if it would be okay to give herself permission to ease into having the experience, knowing she's not alone in it because I'm right there with her, and that if she can process through the experience of that shock and startle and overwhelm that happens in her body every time, it won't keep happening. It'll be over and it'll be in the past. Would that be okay with you? I asked. And she said, okay. And so for several sets of bilateral stimulation, you could see the shaking, the trembling, but you also saw the movement. And then eventually she came out of the shock and the overwhelm into feeling anxious because she didn't know how her mom was going to respond next. It's like, okay, now we've got some traction, there's movement. She's now having an emotional response to a situation where there is some unpredictability, and it makes sense because that's what any reasonable person's response would be, to have some anxiety. So we continued with the processing, get to the other side, 0 SUD, 7 VOC, clear body scan. It is truly over, and it's in the past for her. So what's the takeaway? The takeaway is very simple, which is we all respond to the demands of memory processing in the ways that we respond to other life demands, and that our clients are going to do in therapy and in EMDR memory processing what they do in their lives. So in this case, what the client does is brace against the level of arousal that happens immediately in her body and tries to move away from it. Of course, one can expect that that's the response she's going to have in processing. What's the takeaway? We need to coach our clients and help them by giving themselves permission to ease into having a very different experience. And not only are they not alone with it this time, we'll actually get through it. There'll be a beginning, a middle, and an end, and then it is truly over and in the past. Thanks for listening.